Hello, welcome back. The last time that we were here, we looked at pronunciation. And one of the things that we talked about was there are many differences between English pronunciation of words compared to Bahasa Melayu or Bahasa Malaysia, or how Malaysians speak English. Okay, so we said that some of the differences have to do with vowel sounds and consonants, yeah, and intonation. And today we're going to talk about stress, but let me just recap a bit. Vowel sounds in English. So English is a little bit of a complex language, whereas Bahasa Melayu, for example, the vowel sounds fairly similar in length. In English, we have long vowels, short vowels, where we put the stress on more, and in some words, we put less stress or stress on the vowels. For example, we said the last time, words like pool, swimming pool, and pull, the action of pulling something. So pull is a long vowel and pull is a short vowel. So they are different words, of course, different spelling. They kind of sound the same. The difference is the length of the vowels. Now, English has plenty of those. Yeah, did, G-I-D, did, which is short, and then you have deed, the deed of a house, the document that describes, the property, the deed, and or a deed, a good deed, yeah. So did and deed are also long and short vowels. So what happens is, because in Bahasa Melayu, we said that the vowels are similar in length. They don't make that difference. And so what happens is, because of the mother tongue influence, we said mother tongue influence or first language influence, those long vowels become shortened or short vowels become lengthened. Yeah, so instead of saying pool as in swimming pool, you say swimming pool. Swimming pool is a shorter version of the word pool. And instead of did, D-I-D, she did something, you say did. She did something. I mean, we have heard people say that a lot, yeah? So there are differences in the length of vowels, so short vowels and long vowels. Whereas in Bahasa Melayu, they are the same, whether it's the A sound or the E sound or the E sound or the U sound. And we also learned earlier that, English has, the standard alphabets are just A, E, I, O, U, but there are more sounds, yeah, than those vowels. There are more than 5 sounds. Those are just the standard vowels, A, E, I, O, U. Those are alphabets, really. But in terms of sound, and remember I said from the beginning of the session, yeah, that the sessions that we had before, that it is actually about the sound that we produce. And that's why English is not a language where it is pronounced, words are pronounced the way they are spelled. Whereas sometimes Bahasa Melayu is very much like that. So the way the word is spelled, betul, B-E-T-U-L, the vowels are the and the U, so it's betul. Yeah, it will never be pronounced any other way. But English, there are all these differences. So vowels is one. And of course, there are words in English where we have 2 consonants together, whereas you don't get that in Bahasa Melayu. And so we say words like plan, P-L-A-N, plan, becomes pelan. Now, I know pelan is the Malay word probably, pelan, but even when you want to say pelan in English, it should be plan, but it's quite difficult for the tongue, so it becomes pelan. What happens is that we insert the sound in between the two consonants. Film is a very common one, so film becomes film. Film is Bahasa Melayu, but so the thing is, there is always there are many English words which we have Malaysianized. We have found an equivalent for the English word. So we have for film in Malay is film. We have plan in Malay is pelan, and so many words like that. However, because of that, I think it's quite common that because we are so used to saying it in the Malay form, then we carried it on to the English version. Okay, so in the English phonetic system, that sound is called a schwa. It's just an inverted E. E, the alphabet E, is inverted. It becomes schwa. So the is spelled with a schwa. The word the is THE in the conventional spelling. But the sound, when you write it in the phonetic symbols, it is the sound, the symbol the, which is a phonetic symbol, with the schwa. So it becomes the. Okay? So the other thing that's common is that Malaysian speakers like to drop the final sound of a word. So it's very common to drop plural forms like, if in English, when a word becomes plural, you either add an S or ES or IES, right? For study becomes studies, STUDIES, studies. But student becomes students, so we put an S. And program, we put an S too. But when Malaysians speak English sometimes, you have heard also, and I have heard many times, that people tend to drop the S sound. It is a common phenomenon. It's quite common. We don't just drop the S sound, we also drop Ds and ED and Ds. Sometimes. For past tense, for example, dropped, DROPPED, the D should be pronounced. So it says dropped. Because if you don't make the sound, it becomes drop. And drop is singular. It's a verb. Dropped is past tense, yeah? When it's present tense, it becomes drops. So many people, though, do not make those sounds, meaning they drop the sounds, yeah? The end sound. Walked. Past tense of talk is talked. And so many words like that. So remember, whenever tenses, plurality, yeah, we tend to drop those sounds that end the word to show the verb tense or plural forms. And when you do that, the meaning changes a little bit. Changes, actually. Yeah? If you wanted to say, I walk to school every day, or I take the bus to school every day, yeah, that means that is what I do every day, and that's why the subject, I, takes on the present tense without the S. But if we're talking about somebody else, then the verb will take an S. So she walks to school every day. Yeah? That we already know. But when you don't say it the way it is spelled to indicate tense, verb tense, then the meaning changes, because then you meant to say, this is what I do every day. Or sometimes people tend to add the sound. So instead of saying, I walk to school every day, you say, I walked to school every day. Okay, that's another thing, people do tend to add sounds to the word. It's the same phenomenon as the inserting the schwa, for film and plan. Plan becomes plan, film becomes film, walk becomes walked, when it's supposed to be walk or walks. So when you drop a sound, or you add a sound to the end of a verb, especially a verb, then the meaning changes because the verb tense changes. And most times it is an error, yeah, because what we meant to say I wanted to use the past tense, but instead I don't add the D or ED or IED at the end of the verb, then it doesn't indicate past tense. So English is very specific that way. To indicate verb tense, we already did this in a few lessons before, that, when you indicate verb tense, tense has to do with time. Verb tense has to do with time. So what I do every day, what I did yesterday, what I have been doing, every day, or what I've done. So these are all what we call verb inflections, meaning we change the form of the verb to indicate time. Okay? So when you drop the ending, especially for plural or past tense, or any other tenses really, then the meaning changes. And you will make an error because that's not what you mean. Right. And we also looked at, the English word is fricative. I remember saying that you don't need to know the term, but that is the word. And fricatives are sounds like the and the, which appears, the common examples are the and the sound, which is words like, simple words like this and that. There is a distinction between those two sounds. So what happens with the Malaysian tongue or Bahasa Melayu is that because the sound does not exist in Bahasa Melayu, for example, yeah. So instead of saying this or that, we say this or that. And so think this through. And some sounds appear in the middle of a word, like mother. Mother is the same sound as that. It's a thicker sound than the find this or that or think. Yeah? So mother, that sound is in the middle of the word, not necessarily at the beginning. And so there are so many words like that in English. And we need to be careful how we pronounce them. Otherwise people will not be able to follow you. Yeah? Especially if you are in a more formal setting or slightly more formal setting, like in a meeting or an interview, a job interview, or a presentation. People do listen because you want people to listen to you. If you're pitching to your clients on your product, then you need them to listen to you. Okay? And finally, there are initial sounds like pin. Pin is a thin. Thin is that fricative, but pin, I went through this with you. Pin, tin, kin. These are plosives which says, so we say pin, we say tin. We don't say what Malaysian says, pin or tin. Yeah, so that sound is slightly different. Well, but the meaning doesn't change, so that's not too bad. Okay? Right. So what I wanted to cover today is just word stress, okay? And some of which I've already mentioned, yeah? So the word stress has to do with English words are made up of syllables, sounds, syllable sounds. So dress has one syllable, dress, the air sound, right? See, it's very much related to vowels, yeah? Or stress, or class, one syllable. But result, two syllables, result. Okay? Now, in English, there are vowel sounds, and we need to know where to put the stress on. Okay, so this is something that when you speak Bahasa Melayu, sometimes if we are not sure, then we tend to put the stress in the wrong place. For example, yeah, university. University. The stress is in the university. the third syllable, university. But many people don't do that. They will just say university, or university, they will say, or university. So you lose the stress sound, or it's moved. Okay, a more common example is words like develop. Develop. The stress is in the first syllable. Develop. Or determine. It's determine is actually the stress is on the second syllable. Determine. Not determine, but determine. These are common because we don't have word stress in Bahasa Melayu, maybe some other languages as well. Calendar is a very common example too. It's calendar. Some people say calendar, where the stress happens on the second syllable. Calendar, not calendar. And so many words like that, okay? So we have confident, confident. Sometimes people say confident or confident instead of confident. It is a question of knowing where to make the stress, in that word. Demonstrate. Demonstrate. Where is the stress? Demonstrate is in the first syllable, the first sound. And we also know that many words, when they change form, so develop is a verb, develop, you develop something, right? When it becomes a noun, it becomes development. Development. So develop, the stress is in the second syllable, develop. But when it becomes a noun, it changes to development. Development. And the stress changes slightly. Development. Okay, there are so many words like that, and I'm going to go through this change of forms in words. Perhaps we did touch a little bit on this some sessions earlier, but I'm going to focus on this in the next lesson, okay? And finally, intonation. Well, I think I mentioned earlier that in terms of intonation, the English language and Bahasa Melayu specifically, and other language, maybe some other languages as well, there's not too much difference. There's not a lot of difference. However, what's important to remember is that the meaning of the word has nothing to do with intonation. Now, if I say just now development, that is where the stress, that is stress, stress on which vowel to stress on, which sound to stress on. But if you say it wrongly and you say development or something like that, the meaning still remains. It's still the same word. Okay, the only difference is that we have now pronounced it differently. So meaning really is not really linked to intonation. Intonation has to do with the variation in pitch, how you sound. When someone is angry, the intonation is slightly a higher pitch. Okay, when you're quite serious or speaking at a meeting, for example, you cannot have very high pitches because it might sound like either you are angry or you are excited or you're too excited. So intonation is the sound actually of that you produce. Now it's probably clearer when you speak in a sentence or sentences rather than in a word form. Okay, so a language like Bahasa Melayu, for example, there's very little contrast between stressed and unstressed syllables. As I mentioned earlier, it's only in English, that stress is important, and we have to show, or people need to hear the difference. People need to be able to hear or listen to your speech, and that you are making that difference so that they can follow what you're saying. Okay, and finally, I think there are many reasons for variation, many. And there is nobody is wrong and nobody is right. The thing is, in English, there are all these important elements to consider when you want to speak in English and use English words and speak English fluently and accurately sometimes. Remember that I've already said it just now, I guess, when I said that, we say film, instead of film, we say film, yeah? Or instead of plan, we say plan. Because there are many loan words, we borrow words in Bahasa Melayu. We borrow from English. We also borrow from other languages. There are some Malay words that are from Sanskrit or Hindi or whatever it is. But certainly English, yeah? So from film, it becomes film. There is a Malay version of all these words like geology. You can say that in Malay as well. Now it is spelled Geologi. Psychology. So all these branches of science, which psychology, geology, anthropology, all these have a Malay version, but it's spelled in the Malay way, yes, spelled in Malay, the way Malay is pronounced. So instead of biology, which is an English word by the way, biology, something like that, because it's spelled Biologi. So these are borrowed or loan words. Telephone is a good example. People don't really want to say telephone. Sometimes they say telephone because it is a variation of telephone. Yeah, catering is apparently quite common now. They like to say catering in Malay, but it is actually spelled Ketering, something like that. Yeah, so be mindful about these things. Of course, we already mentioned it earlier that you have mother tongue or your first language interference. Okay, now there are many words in English where they may be spelled the same but they are pronounced differently. Yeah, words like church, 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 right? And it's the same sound as charity, but chrome, that is a k sound. It's chrome, yeah, chrome, but it is pronounced with a k sound. And so church is also ch, but it's pronounced ch. So English has all these differences, and there's so many words like that. Yeah, of course, there's this influence of what we call orthography, or orthography. Orthography is how it's written. Yeah? Spelling, influences how you pronounce a word as well. Again, like I said, yeah, bicycle, bicycle, bicycle. The sound is bicycle, but bigot. Look up that word, yeah, bigot is pronounced bigot, not bigot. Whereas bicycle is bi, bigot is also bi, but they're different sounds. So there's so many words like that. Okay. Of course, we also know, perhaps we also experience the same, maybe even our children these days, they are influenced by American or English, programs on TV. And they look to these programs as how they want to speak or how they want to pronounce English. So yeah, the American influence is quite prominent among some Malaysians, even British, okay? Even the British language. And finally, exposure, because we are in a community. It's exposure. It's got to do with exposure. And I think Malaysia, we have a wealth of exposure for English because everything has subtitles. English programs have Malay subtitles, road signs, signs everywhere. You may have a Malay and then an English version. And so many things are like that. We have a lot of exposure here, not to mention TV programs. So what we call sometimes a discourse community, a community where the people within that community shares that language or uses that language more often. Okay, so imagine if you you don't have to actually be in that country where the language comes from. I mean, it's been researched many times over and over again. One of the things that the researchers say is that immersion is probably the best way to excel or learn a language. But apparently, there are many people now researching that phenomenon, and it's not necessary, really. So, I mean, if you want to speak French well, you have to be in France. Okay, so in the end, how we speak, the things that we say, how we say them, will also reflect on our ability to use the language and also the kind of person that we are. Thank you very much.